If you can open up to Isaiah 58, we have two more sermons. We've been going through this whole idea of we have been mining Isaiah, looking for jewels, looking for really not only powerful passage of scriptures, but visions of Jesus and what he wants to do for us. Before I go on Isaiah 58, I kind of want to give you a little bit of a weekly agenda, what happens with our pastoral staff. So every Sunday is the beginning of the week. When we meet together, Pastor Chris does music to lead us in worship. We'll have myself, who preaches the sermons, and then often Pastor Ken and Pastor Trevor and Pastor Will are around here doing administration and also teaching different classes. And the objective is to kind of keep really the function of worship on Sunday going well. So what we do, most of us will take off Monday, and then Tuesday we will have a staff meeting. We'll start talking about how did Sunday go. Are there any big issues that we have to deal with, any people problems that we have to bring up? Then we'll talk about the next week. What do we have to be done for the next week, next Sunday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? What specific things do we have to get done? And then what we'll do is we'll take time praying for one another, but also talking about really the issues in not just church, but culture. This past week, something came up very interesting, and it started a very compelling conversation. One of the staff members was meeting with somebody, and the person went up to them and asked them this question. Why does it seem like Christianity sometimes is so boring? I'm bored with Christianity. And he was talking about how this person was saying, I've read Scripture so much, I just know it. I'm kind of bored with it. Other people would say stuff like, yeah, I'm tired of just talking about prophecy. It seems like all we do is talk about prophecy, waiting for stuff to happen, nothing ever happens, and then the next Bible study is another prophecy, and doesn't that kind of get tiring after a while? I'm just kind of bored. Or some people say, the same theological debates always come up. Can you lose your salvation? Are you elected? Do you have free will? And it's just like it's the same discussion over and over again, and doesn't Christianity get a little boring at times? And I was thinking through that on my own. So I went back to my study to get ready for Isaiah 58. And I asked myself this question. It almost felt blasphemous, but I want to ask it to you. Because we can say we're bored with Christianity, but really, aren't we just saying this? Are you bored with Jesus? Like, do you ever get to the place where, it just doesn't feel like I have any life in my walk with God? Just feel like I've read this. After I read this, I yawn. I don't even understand it sometimes. Isn't this about people who lived 4,000 years ago? What does this have to do with me? Where is Jesus? And I would say most of you feel this way. You just won't say it because it doesn't sound right. There comes points and times in our life where it feels like something is gunked up in the system. So like in your kitchen sink, there can be a pipe where you have so much grease down there, it just stops the flow. Some ways, life just happens where I just don't feel the presence of God. And we're a very feeling-oriented society. If we get excited, then that means it was real. If we don't, where is God? He's distant. I once heard somebody say, even when I pray, it feels like my prayers hit the ceiling and bounce back as if he doesn't even hear me. And a lot of it's based on feeling. And feeling is important. But have you ever just been bored? And I'll tell you what, that's a hard question to answer, but I guarantee you, a lot of you right now would say, I haven't talked to God in years. I don't know who he is. Well, Isaiah 58 is going to deal with that. And really what he's going to deal with is this issue of what is true spirituality? What does it look like? What is false spirituality? And I am going to tell you, false spirituality is what gunks up the system. And often we mistake false spirituality for the real thing. Isaiah is going to talk about the real thing, the real diamond, the real Arkenstone, what it looks like in a person's life. So if you can turn to Isaiah 58, I want to read a few verses, and I want to show you that's what this passage is about. Look at verse 8. He begins with the word then, and this is very key how this is written. He says, then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. He's saying something happened before, something needs to be done, and when you do that thing, then you are going to have a vibrant walk with God. Then the glory of the Lord is going to start basically processing through you. You're not gunked up anymore. Same thing in verse 9. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry for help, and he will say, here I am. That's real relationship. But something is gunking it up. That's why he keeps using the word then. If you go to verse 11, if you get this basically clog out of the way of your spiritual system, the Lord will guide you always. I want that. He will satisfy your need in a sun-scorched land. Ooh, that sounds refreshing. He'll strengthen your frame. You'll be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. That is a free-flowing spiritual life. That's what I want. But something is going on that's gunking up the system. So let's begin in verse 1, because he's going to talk about it. And look at how verse 1 is written. Sometimes, I tell you what, I've read this passage a lot, and I never just stopped on verse 1 and let it sink in. Charles Spurgeon, a great preacher, said a lot of people will read maybe a chapter or two for their devotions. Some will read a paragraph, but sometimes I like to just bathe and soak in one verse. And if you let verse 1 sink in, it's kind of shocking, actually. So he uses the word, he begins, Isaiah says, shout aloud and do not hold back. What does that mean? That means tell everybody as loud as you can. Well, tell them what? Raise your voice like a trumpet. I mean, really, tell them. Don't hold back. Well, what? Declare to my people their rebellion, and to the descendants of Jacob their sins. So he's saying, don't hold back. Just let people know, you guys are all rebels and sinners. That's a fast way to make friends and influence people, isn't it? Oh. What does he want us to shout about? Verse 2 and 3. He wants us to talk about hypocrisy. So what he's going to do is in verse 2 and 3, he's going to evaluate the real heart of a soul, like a guy inspecting a diamond. He's going to say, this is where you're flawed. You look like a diamond, but really you're a cubic zirconia. So what is the problem? What's making people flawed? They're hypocrites. They're fakes. They're not true walkers with God. Let me show you. Verse 2. This is what I'm going to call the danger of hypocrisy. Day after day, they seek me out. That's a good thing, isn't it? Constantly, continually looking for God. They seem eager to know my ways. Like, that's a good thing, isn't it? As if they were a nation that does what is right and has not forsaken the commands of God. They ask me for just decisions, and they seem eager for God to come near them. So verse 2 says, from the outside, they look good. That's why seem is used twice. From all the people watching them, man, that's a real godly person right there. They try to meet with God as much as they can. They have the commandments of God on their lips. Wow, they look the part. But look at the problem. The problem is verse 3. They get kind of irritated with God. They say, look what we've done. We fasted. That means they've withheld from food. They've done a continual religious ceremony. Look, we fasted, they say, and God, you haven't seen it. You haven't done a thing for me. Why have we humbled ourselves and you have not noticed? So basically, inside, they're mad at God because they believe if I do this, God should do this for me. He owes me. That's religion. Religion is doing something so God will do something for you. Jesus says it like this. You clean the outside of the cup. You know, really, I look good. I'm doing all these good things. But inside, it's really still about you. It's about self. called hypocrisy. And basically, hypocrisy, according to verse 8, is what's holding God's glory back. That's why it says then. You have been doing this, and it's holding back God's glory. I think probably a big reason why some people are bored with God is they're hypocrites. They're fakes. So, for instance, look at what verses 4 through 5 say. Okay, start with verse 3 again. Why have we fasted, they say, and you've not seen it? So I'm doing all of this, God, and you don't repay me for that. Why have we humbled ourselves, and you have not noticed? Yet on the day of your fasting, you do as you please, you exploit all your workers. Your fasting ends in quarrels and strikes, striking each other with wicked fists. You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high. So they're religious, but they're angry people. They're religious, but they don't like each other. They're religious, but they're jerks. I call this Norbert Rechner religion. And my mom doesn't mind this. I've talked to her about it. My grandfather's name was Norbert Rechner. Norbert Rechner would wear this, he'd wear these suspenders, have a white cut-off sleeves. Remember, it's kind of like you're a very serious person where you wear a white button shirt and cut-off sleeves, and blue slacks. And he lived with us for a while, he'd always be at the couch doing the Hail Mary and the Rosary. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women. Blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now at the hour of our death. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. And if I stirred, he'd say, Chris, we're praying the Rosary. This is a serious time. Very holy. Man, could he go to church on Sunday. He'd go to the first service. But you know what? He never smiled. He was a jerk. Like he's always mad. He's always angry. He always made my mom and his wife serve him. Like, wow, is he holy, but man, I don't want to have to do anything with him. And some of you are like, well, you're ripping on Catholics. Baptists do it too. They wear the tie. They'll only want hymns. They'll come in and look very holy. And then they'll go into their car and they'll ream their kids out left and right. Or they'll go to church on Sunday, but they'll drink like fiends the rest of the week. They look the part, but inside, Jesus says, they're full of dead man's bones. Why do a lot of people do not find joy in God? Because it's a show. It's not the real thing. He's talking about fasting here. Fasting is serious business. So what is fasting? So fasting is a time in your life when you abstain from all or some kind of food, some drink, so you can focus on God through prayer and supplication. So fasting is a time when I want to meet with God. It's not meant to be a show. It's meant to go to God when I have a serious issue. And basically the purpose of it is to afflict the soul during a season of repentance or desperation. Maybe I've been failing in my life. I really need help. So I inflict the soul. What that means is I abstain from my cravings. So that hunger leads me to God to say, God, I am desperate. I need you. And it's a personal thing. I can remember it was a really weird time in my life. My sister was pregnant, and I felt like God was saying, fast for your sister's pregnancy. So every Wednesday, I wouldn't eat any food. I'd just drink water. And I did that for her whole 9 months. When her oldest son, Daniel, was born, the umbilical cord was wrapped twice around his neck. And he miraculously, I'm not saying that, hey, wow, Chris, a miracle happened, but I am saying God wanted me to pray for that. God will burden you. When he burdens you, fasting is saying, God, I'm desperate. I need you. So that's the purpose of it. Fasting's posture is not to be a public show of piety. I'm not here to impress you with my seriousness. Look at Isaiah verse 5. Is this the kind of fast I have chosen? Only a day for people to humble themselves, to look very holy. Is it only for the bowing of one's head like a sackcloth into ashes, Is that what you call a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? Go to Matthew real quick. Matthew 6, 16 to 18. Jesus deals with this. Matthew 6, 16 to 18. He says, when you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do, like religion is a very heavy, serious thing. For they disfigure their faces to show others that they are fasting. Why do people get very serious with the religion? Because He wants to see if they really mean it? No, they're doing it to show others just how holy they are. Honestly, if you look at Islam, sometimes we're so impressed that they do 5 prayers a day. Oh, they bow down before God. See how holy they are? That's not what God wants. There's so much more holy in us Christians. We don't do that 5 times a day. It's not what you do, it's who you are. It's easy to do things. We can't get past that. Look at what Jesus continues to say. Truly I tell you, basically he's talking about when you do it outward, truly I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face. Meaning take a shower, put some shampoo on, put some makeup on, guys. You know, that's what this is. No, it's not saying that. It's just seeing if you're awake. Seth is falling asleep on me. I'm seeing if he's awake. But it's saying, but when you fast, put oil on your head, wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to others that you're fasting, but only to your Father who's unseen. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. When you make it a personal issue between you and God, He sees. And in the plan, it was never intended to be a ritual, continual command. So according to Isaiah, it sounds like it became a ritual for the religious people. We do this all the time. But according to the Old Testament, they really only fast 1 day of the year. It's the Day of Atonement. But what they did make a ritual, I was doing some reading on it, you know what a ritual was every year? Were feast days, joyful days were supposed to be done on an annual basis, where fasting wasn't mandated. And 1 Timothy 4:8 says, be very careful for the people that force you to abstain from food, because it's all outward show. It's all outward show. Even like, I remember Lent, I wouldn't eat fish. Why not? So other people knew I was holy. Did I do it to really meet with God? Do you do things to really meet with God, or other people will know I'm holy? And if that's why you do it, it gunks up the system. And you won't have joy. So how do we quit playing games? That's what he's going to go into. So we go back to Isaiah 58. He's going to give you the if you do these things, then joy will come. It's if-then statements. Starting in verse 6, watch what he says. Is this the kind of fasting I've chosen? To loose the chains of injustice, untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke? Is it not to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see them naked, to clothe them and not turn away from your own flesh and blood. If you do those things, then your light will break. So the very first thing that I would say is a sign that you have real, true spirituality is you see need around you and you do what you can to help. Look at verse 7. When you see the naked, that person who needs clothing, needs sustenance, needs protection, when you see the naked to clothe them and not to turn away from who? Your own flesh and blood. So look at the word see. It's not to share your food with the hungry, provide the poor wanderer shelter. When you see the naked, clothe them. This is an issue of personal proximity, not political correctness. The problem with politics is we do it to show. But we should do it to care. Let me show you what I mean. So there is a teaching called providential proximity. When I was about 8 years ago, I went to a Calvin January series, and this guy that was speaking was what's called a Christian ethicist. What is the right thing to do? And so here was the topic. He said he went to a Sunday night meeting with his grandson, and the speaker at the church was a missionary to Zaire. It's a very poor place in Africa. And he said, $1 will feed a family of 4 for a month. And he's like, wow, that's compelling. $1 American will feed a family of 4 for a month. They listened to the presentation. They were there for about an hour, and the church took on this missionary because it was a very compelling message. After that, him and his grandson went walking home, and an ice cream truck came by. You know, it had like the Popeye the Sailor Man song, da-da-da-da-da-da. You've had that come near. And his grandson said, Grandpa, can I have an ice cream cone? The ice cream cone was $3. Do I buy my grandson a $3 ice cream cone because I could take that $3 and give it to the missionary that's in Zaire to feed a family of 4 for 3 months? What do I do? It's a big ethical question. And he started doing a lot of researched a lot of Christians throughout time, and they said this is an issue of providential proximity. Even Isaiah is talking about it. And he begins providential proximity, says, God is providential. He puts you in the positions he wants you to be in, and he brings people around you he wants you to care for. You need eyes to see. So first begins with your family. If you make a vow to your wife, you take care of her first. Then if you have children, you take care of them next. That's where it starts. That's where it starts. Then you start reaching out from there. The church family, you look at their needs. We have missionaries because we try to find missionaries that align with our policy, our perspective of how you reach the world for Christ. And we're very, very intentional about that. So when your money is given in tithes, it does go to people. We are supporting the Freelands in Cameroon or Chris Sadowitz in Japan. We're very specific about that. Then you go to friends, neighbors, and co-workers, the people you know. If they have need and you can fulfill it and you don't fulfill it, what's wrong with you? Well, I voted for the right political party. They're taking care of it. That's really, the national issues should be last, even outlying issues. And we've turned national issues on its head. The way we can tell we are virtuous people is we vote for the right party. No, that's all show. You should start taking care of the people that are closest to you. When you drop a pebble into the water, that pebble where it hits is the most important place, and then it should spread out from there. I'll give you an illustration. So this was a crazy weekend for me. I was at men's retreat, and then my daughter graduated from Moody yesterday. And while we are going to the graduation, we had to drive through Chicago traffic. We got a hotel in downtown Chicago. So I had to get my daughter to the ceremony pretty early. The ceremony's at 10, so we wanted to get up early so we could get her there at least by 8:30. I tell my wife, get the kids packed up, I'm going to go over to the parking garage. On the 4th floor of the parking garage was my car. I get into my car early, about 8 o'clock, I put in the key and it goes, voo, 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 voo. Nothing. This is 8 o'clock yesterday morning, my car's battery is dead. And I'm like, oh boy. I better get my daughter to the ceremony. If I don't, my wife's going to kill me. So I'm like, oh, I got to do something. So I run to the lobby, and this is in downtown Chicago in a very businessy area, and there's all of these guys are busy. They're all up in the lobby because everybody has something to do, guys with golf clubs, guys with sharp suits on, in and out, in and out, and in and out. And I go to the front desk, and this guy's standing in the front desk, and he's kind of like this, just kind of sitting there like that, you know. And I go up and I said, hey, my car died in the parking ramp over there. Can you jump it? And he goes, I don't have a car, man. I don't have jumper cables. Do you have maintenance here? He goes, I'm busy. I can't help you. Why don't you just go look, call somebody? Look, okay, thanks. It's terrible customer service. I go around, I'm asking 20 very important guys, and they're all looking at me like, no, can't help you. One guy said, I got a car, but I don't have jumper cables. Can't help you. I mean, I'm talking 20 guys. Most of them just kind of look at me like, can't help you. And all of a sudden, this guy's listening to me, and he's over here, and he's got a little bucket, and he's a little short guy, comes out with this bucket, and he goes, I've been listening to you. You need jumper cables? I can get you jumper cables. This little guy who was listening to me the whole time comes out and goes, I'll take care of you. I'll help you. He probably looked like the most unimportant guy there was the one that cared the most. Gave me some jumper cables. Now I need a car to jump. There's no car. The guy who was standing back here, seeing me outside the hotel holding these jumper cables, and I'm looking frantic, and I got my wife ready to kill me. Anyhow, I'm holding these jumper cables right there. The guy behind the desk, he must have had like a half hour off. He jumps right into a car right in front of me and speeds off. Oh, I wanted to kill that guy. So who rescues me? My daughter, who just got done driving Chicago, comes over and says, sure, Dad, I'll help you. We go up there and jump it. And man, people just don't care. They really don't care. Do you know why people don't care? We're so busy. We're talking about at Staco. Why are we so busy? We just don't have time for anybody anymore. We don't see because we're so busy. We got places to go. It's the first inning. I might miss my son's 120th game that I've seen this year. And boy, I can't miss one foul ball, you know. I'll be a terrible father the rest of my life if I miss seeing a foul ball. I remember my dad would rarely go to my games, and he would feel terrible because he's working, and he's working out of state. He'd come home and say, Chris, I can't go to any of your baseball games this summer. Dad, it's okay because you don't have to play the game for me. Like it's my game, big deal. I don't care. I know you love me. But now, man, if we miss one of our kids' games, it's like we've committed a mortal sin. Because sports is the idol of America that we bow down to. It's crazy. It's crazy. Do we have time for anybody? Providential proximity says, just look. So what else does he tell us to do? Second thing is look at verse 9. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry for help, and he will say, here am I. If you do away with the yoke of oppression and the pointing a finger and malicious talk. What is malicious talk? It's using my tongue to criticize everybody else. I am just a critic. I don't really know people. I just rip on them. Everybody has got problems. It's probably their own fault. I told the story in the first service, and Chris let me tell it, and it's a really interesting story. He's telling me the story about this guy who was on a subway. While he's on a subway, there was a guy sitting next to him, and he had his kids, and his kids were wild on the subway. They weren't listening, and the guy is just sitting on a subway like this, you know, and his kids are bouncing around the subway. And the guy's like, man, is he a terrible father? What is wrong with this guy? So he sat down next to him, he started talking to him, and the guy's saying, man, I'm having a bad day. And he goes, what happened? He goes, man, my wife just died, and I don't know how to tell my kids. It'll devastate them. And I don't know what to do. I'm frozen. I don't know what to do. So what he was saying in his mind is this guy's a terrible father. But the truth of the matter is this guy's devastated. But what happens is our tongues lead our brain. In James, he's talking about Darren read that verse about taking care of the widow, and that's true religion. Right before that section of what true religion is taking care of the widow, there's a whole section of the tongue. The tongue's like a fire. Be very, very careful of it. Because once you start judging maliciously, it will burn up relationships. It'll burn up churches. It burns up churches. Like it's unbelievable how the wagging tongue can destroy people. This says in verse 9, do away with it in the pointing of the finger and malicious talk. And then the final thing we need to do is delight in spending time with God and his people. Look at verse 13. If you keep your feet from breaking the Sabbath, from doing as you please on my holy day, called the Sabbath of Delight. So what's the Sabbath? The Sabbath was a day of the week that God set apart for the Jewish people from Friday about 7 o'clock, that's twilight, till Saturday about 7 o'clock. That day was set apart where they weren't to work, they weren't to be busy, they weren't to figure everything out. They were there to spend time with their family and their God and rest and worship. And Isaiah is saying we need to learn to delight in that again, to put some space in our life that is designated for spending time with God and the people we love, and even His church, His bride. But we're like, I don't want to have anything to do with people. I once heard somebody came up to me today, or not today, a couple days ago, and said, you know, I really love Jesus, but I hate His church. I've heard that so many times. I really love Jesus, but I hate the church. And truly, if the church is the bride of Christ, it's like telling your best friend, dude, I love hanging out with you, but man, just don't bring your wife along. I can't stand her. You know, man, you're a really great guy, but that woman you married, holy mackerel, I can't stand her. When people say, I love Jesus, but I hate His church, it's the same thing. He's saying, if you call Sabbath a delight and the Lord's holy day honorable, and if you honor it by not going your own way and not doing as you please or speak idle words, then you'll find your joy in the Lord. Then you'll delight in Him. If you carve out space for God, you will delight in Him. I was thinking about this. What happened to our Saturdays? What happened to them? Saturdays, when I grew up, they were days that were incredible days. Like, I loved them. My dad would usually be out cutting the lawn. I'd help him a little bit, and then I'd grab a basketball, start shooting, playing horse, and my dad would stop the lawnmower and play horse with me, and my brother and sisters would come, and then we'd have a barbecue about noon. And we'd just hang out all day, and we'd get to know each other, play some games, and talk. But now it seems like if my Friday and Saturday and Sunday aren't filled with something, I'm a loser. I got to be busy. Why do I got to be busy? Because the busier I am, the more important I must be. Why can't we have a Saturday where, what are you doing today? I'm going walking with the dog and just talking to God. You want to come along? You're not getting anything done. Exactly. Maybe that's why Jesus is boring, because He isn't allowed in. I was thinking, how do I close this? And because we are a sports country, I think, and you've probably heard me say this before, but if I would to do a metaphor for what Christianity is compared to sports, it's either we're like armchair quarterbacks who really aren't participating and just sit back and criticize, or we're like golfers. All we want to do is get a lower score than everybody else. What's a lower score? I'm a better believer. I don't sin as much, so my scorecard has less mistakes than yours. So I'm better. To me, real Christianity is football or rugby, where you jump in, you block for one another, you tackle, you make up for the mistakes of others, and if you don't play together, you don't win. It's not golf. It's not watching TV. It's jumping in and giving everything I have. Because the truth is, if God gives you grace and you give that grace out, it's going to be kind of like a sink that has been unclogged and that water can now move. Finish with this little illustration. So at Staco this week, we had a fireside chat on Friday night. I got 7 big logs and placed 7 big logs down on the ground. And I picked out the 7 biggest men in the group. And I had them stand behind the logs. And here was the objective. They had to pick up the log for 1 minute, and if they could keep all 7 logs off the ground for 1 minute, the job is done. It was fantastic. So they picked up the logs. They were all big guys. They could pick it up, and man, it didn't seem too hard. And then I said, oh, wait a second. I forgot to give you the rest of the rules. So they each got an envelope. The first person got an envelope, and he had to pick up a log, and he put this little P. I won't tell you what that stands for. But he had to pick up the log, and he said, God tells us to carry one another's burdens. So he carried the log. The next guy said, I agree with that. We carry another one's burdens, but I won't pick up my log until I figure out what my friend's doing. So the friend said, I can't pick up the log because I got a cornhole tournament, I got a bass fishing tournament, I've got all kind of things I got to do. So you know what? Let's just leave our logs here. So they dropped the logs. No. They actually gave it to this guy because he was carrying a log. So they put the logs on him. He had 3. The next guy, his thing said, he was the biggest guy of the group. I would pick up the log, but I've never been taught how to pick up logs, so I can't pick up the log because I don't know how to pick up the log because nobody taught me how. So he dropped the log and went and sat down. The next guy's kind of mad. He says, it looks like they're not doing it, so I guess I have to do it. And he said, but I don't like doing this, so he just dropped the log. This guy picked up the log for a little bit and said, you know what? I thought picking up logs was supposed to be fun. You know what? This isn't fun to carry logs, so I'm not going to carry this log anymore. So he dropped the log. And then the last guy, who really wanted to help, picked up logs, but he couldn't pick them all up. So he said, I'll take 2, and the rest I'll give to you. So one guy had all of these logs. You want to see what it looked like? Here's what it looks like. And notice the face. He's really enjoying it, isn't he? And there's Justin, who does that in the church all the time. So now look at this, Matt Whitehead. I don't want to pick up a log. No, sir. That's how he's always been, ever since youth group. But look at Tyler's face. It's getting more and more enjoyable for him, isn't it? And look at Matt's face. He don't care. Do you see the illustration? We are given needs to carry, and God gives us enough people to take care of those needs. The problem is, it only seems like a few people see the needs and pick it up, and that person can't keep carrying all the needs. We are a church. We are to carry one another's burdens and carry them together. And if we don't, look what happens. You can't carry it for too much longer. And I'm telling you, when you carry the burden God has given you and you help carry the other person, you won't believe it, but joy will start flowing through you. It will. It doesn't flow through you just by knowing theology. It's because you can win an argument. It flows through you when you start doing and becoming, not just knowing.